即係呢個節目係貢獻俾個社會 ，share 我嘅 thought。我覺得我要嘅資訊想同大家 share 嘅係越廣泛嘅平台，咁係越好啦嚇。我係唔收錢，亦都唔會收錢嘅。即係呢個節目，如果你覺得有教育性嘅，更好啦。大家好，今日呢個節目咧比較特別啲，我有一位嘉賓，就係呢個以色列駐港嘅總領事，咁就即係會討論下而家嗰個戰爭有咩最新情況，有冇和平嘅希望。咁但係因為總領事先生咧就其實佢中文都好叻嘅，普通話咁，但係我哋最後結果即係大家贊成咗用英文嚟到做呢個訪問啊，可能佢嘅普通話好過我嘅普通話，咁就所以今次咧就如果即係英文唔係好流暢嘅朋友，可能睇字幕啊，咁我而家開始嚇。OK， thank you very much, for agreeing to do this interview with us, Mr. Amir Nati, the Consulate General of Israel in Hong Kong. This is a very special time. This is actually the second month since the October 7 attacks on Israel. And of course, immediately afterwards, Israel declared war on Hamas. Well, in my mind, I think it's more than just Hamas, because a lot of other innocent civilians have been caught up, especially in Gaza, but I guess also in Israel and also West Bank. Just to give a brief summary, on October 7, the terror attacks killed more than 1,200 people in Israel. I think also over 250 hostages were taken. Some have been released subsequently. And in the subsequent fighting, I think the official count from the Israeli side is over 400 deaths of Israeli soldiers. On the other side, reported by the Gaza PA Health Ministry, over 16,000 Palestinians have been killed in the fighting, of which over 70% are women and children. I think just children is over 6,000. And the total number of casualties is over probably 60,000, which is about 2.5% of the Gaza population. So that's the current state of affairs that I can see. But anyway, I'm very honored by the presence of the Consulate General Amir Nati. Let me just give a very brief, introduction.
Or I can do it in Mandarin. Since you said a few words in Cantonese, allow me to reciprocate in Mandarin.
Oh, please do. Self-introduction is even better. Mr. Nati, I think, has lived in China through different periods for over 10 years and has studied in Beijing as well. So please.
对，非常感谢Eddie， 我非常开心参加今天的这个节目。我叫蓝天明，我是在以色列外交部工作了24多一点年，其中我在中国内地待了9年，我在北京大学读书，其实是我在外交部开始以前，我在北京大学上学，然后我06年到11年我在上海工作，在以色列总领事馆和在上海2010年的世博会，14年我去成都，我落地以色列在中国的4个外交机构，覆盖了这个西南地区。然后我在成都待了4年多，然后我在以色列是东北亚司的司长，目前在上海特勤局2年多。 负责这个香港和澳门的兴趣。这是我的非常短的介绍。Now,
非常感谢。Please go ahead.
Please. Yes, indeed, Eddie. Today we mark 2 months exactly since the barbaric terrorist attack in Israel that was launched totally unprovoked from the Israeli side by Hamas terrorist organization and the Jihadic Islam terrorist organizations. And allow me maybe to amend some of the terminology. More than 1,200 Israeli citizens were butchered, slaughtered, raped, mutilated by the hands of the terrorists that came with one purpose only: to murder, to spread havoc, and to spread terror. And we declared a war, and we declared it very explicitly on the Hamas and on the Jihadic Islam terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip. We didn't declare a war on the Palestinian people. And again, I mentioned it, it's maybe an anecdote. I'm very happy that you are wearing orange tie today, because the youngest hostage still held by Hamas, Kfir Bivas, was only 9 months old when he was taken from his cradle to serve as a hostage, to be held as a hostage. He's red-headed, that's why it's a very symbolic hair color for us now, together with his 4 years old brother and his mother. 2 months, no sign of life, no visits by the Red Cross or anyone. This is the degree of the cruelty by this terrorist organization. And you mentioned the number of casualties in the Gaza Strip. First of all, may I remind you that the numbers that you quoted are being taken by the Health Bureau of the Gaza Strip, which is held and controlled by Hamas. So basically, the numbers you are quoting now are the numbers that you are using, that were provided to you by a terrorist organization. So I do suggest to take it with a lot of grains of salt here. If you saw footage of the Hamas terrorists fighting in the Gaza Strip, they're all wearing civilian clothes. Why do they do it? In order to blend in the civilian population. They are counted in the casualties, but more than that, they are using their own civilian as a human shield. In our military maneuvers in the Gaza Strip, we try to mitigate the loss of civilian life. We are sorry for the loss of civilian life, but we have to protect the life of our own citizens and the integrity of our borders and in our territory. And this is why we launched these military maneuvers, in order to make sure that the 7th of October will not be repeated. And it will not be repeated because we will make sure that Hamas will not administrate the Gaza Strip anymore, and that they will not have any terrorist capabilities to launch such an inhumane and vicious attack against our civilians.
Well, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I mean, in my mind, there's no doubt that the attacks on October 7 were horrific. You know, they're definitely terrorist attacks. But I do differ from your opinion that it was unprovoked, completely unprovoked, and that was the beginning of the story. I mean, we had a conversation before. So I think I don't want to go back 5,000 years, but I think this year, before October 7, you know, from public information, what I can find, and I don't think it's from the PA or from the Hamas, is that over 200 Palestinians have been killed, mostly, I think, in the West Bank. I'm sure there were, you know, individual circumstances, but I think mostly it's Palestinians killed by the IDF or by Israeli settlers in the West Bank, which I believe is the highest count since 2005. And of course, throughout the 75 years plus history of Israel/Palestine, or the modern Palestine, there have been 5 or 6 wars, and there have been several violent uprisings. So I do not agree with you that this was the beginning of the conflict. So, and also your point that you have declared war just on Hamas. I'm sure that's your aim, but the reality is that a lot of I don't know, as you said, I don't know how you distinguish Hamas from other Palestinians, because I doubt if they wear uniforms. I doubt if they carry a membership card. But in any case, maybe you don't agree with the count of 16,000 dead, but a vast amount of Palestinians have died as a result. And in my mind, I'm not an international law expert, but this is a very unique and rare war in modern times. There are no external refugees, mostly. They have been blockaded for over 15 years. Yes, there's a Rafah crossing with Egypt. I think the Arabs and the other people in the Gulf area bear responsibility as well. But basically, nobody's getting out. So, like Ukraine war, as a comparison, is horrible. But and people, point out that it's so terrible that it's created over 10 million of refugees, fleeing to Poland, Romania, or even Russia, etc. Well, at least they have some place to go. But in terms of Gaza, it's, I believe, 1/3 the size of Hong Kong, and with a similar population density, over 2.3 million people live there. So, they really have nowhere to go. They're internally displaced, right? At the beginning, you told them to get out of the north, to go to the south, because they're going to, bomb the north part. Parts of the south, I believe, was also bombed. And then after you're done with the north, are you going to tell them to move from the south to the north, and then you bomb the rest of it? I mean, I think this is a very unique. I think the IDF has called it as total siege, right? And pardon me, I think the limited knowledge I have in international law, if you have collective punishment, that is actually considered a war crime under the ICC statute. So, so do you have any comments on the situation? I mean, I think it is.
I have, Eddie, a lot of comments about the situation.
But let me just point out one more thing. I know Israel has now a quibble with the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, but I think just overnight he has invoked Article 99 of the UN Charter to call for the emergency UN Security Council meeting to call for immediate ceasefire. So, please respond, and what are your comments on?
My comments, and let's talk about the Gaza Strip, and let's talk about Hamas. Hamas is a radical Islamic movement that was established in 1987, and like it's stated very, very clearly in his charter that was published in 1988, its aim is to obliterate the state of Israel and to establish a radical Islamic state instead. For Hamas, the territory of the state of Israel is Waqf, which means Muslim soil, Muslim territory. Hamas is not an organization that you can start political negotiation. They will not compromise. They are not open for any political solution. They have one aim and one aim only: to destroy the state of Israel. That's their aim. Let's talk about the rule of armed conflict, Eddie. Gaza was never under siege. I'm sorry that you use this terminology that is completely wrong. First of all, the Rafah crossing was open between 2005 and 2007. 450,000 people have crossed it. There were EU supervisors there. That's one thing. The second, have you heard of the Karin A ship, Eddie? That's a ship caught by the IDF in 2002, smuggling weapons into the Gaza Strip, then still controlled by the PA authority. The reason that there was a naval blockade in the Gaza Strip is that because they smuggled weapons into the Gaza Strip, weapons that had one aim: shooting indistinctively about civilians and about citizens in order in the long range to fulfill their plan to destroy the state of Israel. So please ask yourself, what preceded what? The naval blockade or their attempts to smuggle weapons and to launch weapons, by the way, from civilian residents and civilian other civilian places like mosques, like school, and so on. Only yesterday, you mentioned yesterday, we have discovered one of the biggest ammo depot and ammunition depot very close to a civilian resident in the Gaza Strip. Why they do it? Because they use their own population as human shield. And why do they do that? Because for them, everybody is a martyr, a shaheed, that needs to fulfill his destiny by dying for the holy cause of jihad or the war against the infidels. Now, you mentioned the rule of armed conflicts, and I'm saying here very, very clearly, Israel will abide the rule of armed conflict. And what does the rule of armed conflict says, Eddie? First of all, they say that we don't have any obligation to move from our territory any humanitarian support or utilities to the hostile territory. Let's look about, you mentioned 7th of October, were things that were preceded 7th of October. 50% of the electric consumption in the Gaza Strip came from Israel, only 10% of the water, as opposed to what a lot of people think. And we didn't have to pass this also to the Gaza Strip. I want to be very clear on that. We have issued 18,000 permits to people from the Gaza Strip to work in Israel. This number was about to grow. Why? Because we thought that if we would provide them more economic ways or more ways to better their situation, the situation in the Gaza Strip will be calmer. And we were wrong about that. Apparently. Apparently this concept that we have permitted more of their workers to come to Israel has proven wrong. Another thing is that we did allow them to have more things entering the Gaza Strip, and everything again collapsed in the 7th of October in 6:30 in the morning in the barrage of missiles and rockets and the infiltration into Israel. Now ask yourself, Eddie, how much time does it take to prepare, plan such an attack? Years. So even in the years that were coming in the Gaza Strip, the Hamas was busy planning, financing, and this vicious terrorist attack. Ask yourself, Eddie, one more question, since you are worried about the people in the Gaza Strip. You know, Hamas has a metro city, an underground city in the Gaza Strips, hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, with ventilation, with tons of cement inside, that cost many working hours, days, weeks of people, that instead of using this resource or this underground city that, by the way, serves only the terrorists and their leaders, what would have happened if they put all these resources into building schools, into building playground for children, to bring other residential apartments for the benefit of their own people? We did try to better the life of their own people by, giving them more permits to give in Israel. It's failed. Hamas never tried to do that, because Hamas doesn't value life, they value death. And for them, the life of their own citizens is another resources they can use as part of their directive, or the holy directive, or not so holy as we know, to destroy the state of Israel.
Okay, I did point out that before October 7th, up to that point, already there have been over 200 Palestinian deaths, I think mostly in the West Bank, where Hamas is not in control. So in that sense, I still don't believe that you can say the attacks were completely unprovoked. And also, I would like to ask you,
Eddie, again, the attack in 7th of October took years of planning. It manifests a strategic plan by the Hamas to spread terror in Israel. When Israeli army operates also in the West Bank, he does it against radical elements, terrorist elements. And please, again, I'm focused now on what is going on in the Gaza Strip. And the Hamas in the Gaza Strip, again, is an Islamic radical organization. I believe that even in the PA, they will tell you that Hamas does not reflect the Palestinian, and I surely hope so. because for the sake of the future, we will want to see more moderate fractions also within the Palestinian society that will not be educated for hatred for Israel.
Well, I don't think Gaza is run democratically, but I think it was in 2006. I think they were voted in to office. Of course, then they had a civil war of some kind with the, Palestinian Authority, which is in charge of the West Bank. By the way, I think geographically, the current situation really doesn't work. I think I mentioned to you before, I think Gaza is so small and then it's separate. It's not contiguous with West Bank. I think, I hope we can spend more time to talk about the future. I'm more interested in peace. But anyway, we come to that. I think in order for any possible two-state solution, I think Palestine has to be one piece, not two pieces. But anyway, that's a later subject. But coming back to Hamas, and I understand they do not accept the existence of Israel. This is not my conspiracy theory, but I've read comments by very prominent U.S.-based academics and also columnists such as Thomas Friedman of the New York Times, and also I think it's been reported by the Times of Israel, which is, I guess, quite a respected newspaper in Israel. And many of them claim that your Prime Minister Netanyahu and certain factions in his government, or perhaps certain elements in Israel, actually, quote unquote, welcomed or tolerated or perhaps even supported the existence of Hamas. And in reverse, they used to often denigrate the authority of the Palestinian, or the more moderate Palestinian Authority. And the explanation is quite Machiavellian, is that for Israel to delay any negotiations or any permanent two-state solution, you need to have extremists on the other side, which doesn't accept the existence of Israel. So I'm sure you've heard of this observation or these accusations before. How do you respond to that? If that were true, it's quite damaging, right, to the credibility of the current government and to Israel. Basically, people say that there's no good faith in the negotiation that have been going on for decades and decades. There's no good faith towards a two-state solution.
First of all, Eddie, may I remind you that we were involved in the past, in a not so far past, in few violent rounds with the Hamas, 2008, 2012, 2014, 2019, to name some of them. So we have no illusions about the murderous nature of this organization. The second thing, again, I want to refer to you to what I just said. Pre-7 of October, there were more Gazans that work in Israel. By the way, there were also Gazan people that were treated in Israeli hospitals. Okay, because the Israeli hospital is much more advanced than the one in the Gaza Strip. And out of really humanitarian act, we have received dozens of patients from the Gaza Strip to Israel. And by the way, you know what is the ironic and sad thing about that? There was an NGO that was established in Israel that used to drive patients both from the West Bank but also from the Gaza Strip, from the checkpoints to the hospitals. And a lot of the people that were murdered on 7th of October were peace activists that actually drove themselves, patients, from checkpoints to the hospitals. So it's another manifestation of, this murderous nature of this terrorist organization. They killed and murdered people that really, from the bottom of their hearts, practically promoted peace, practically promoted people-to-people understanding in the most basic humanitarian way of it.
So, may I ask, what do you think are the immediate motivations for the attacks on October 7th? From what I've read on a higher level, many people say that they attacked because they see that, there has been Abraham Accords between Israel and various Arab states, such as UAE, Morocco, etc. And there are lots of, I don't think it's rumors, there's lots of news that even Saudi Arabia has been in peace negotiations or normalization negotiations with Israel. And since Saudi Arabia is the biggest Arab state, the richest, most powerful, so perhaps Hamas is afraid that once that is accomplished, then they will be left hanging dry. I pointed out to you, I'm a markets man, I'm a finance guy primarily. I'm sure you are more worried about this conflict spreading to region wide, right? Like Hezbollah, Yemen, and ultimately Iran getting involved. But from oil prices, I say no. Last night the WTI fell below $70, so that tells me the other Arab states and even Iran, which is not Arab, they're not interested in getting involved directly. So I think ultimately, in my mind, the Hamas, what they did was a kamikaze suicide attack, and they did not even accomplish what they wanted to do, which is to stop or to reverse the peace process that's been going on in the Middle East. And I think there's a bigger picture behind that. Ultimately, we'll get to that, right? U.S., China, what roles they play in the region, and I guess in this conflict, and so on. But anyway, do you agree that the attacks were motivated by the desire to stop the peace process? And also, how come Israel, which is well known for its military and intelligence community competence, how come you were caught so off guard and so surprised, and so much damage was done?
You asked a few questions. Allow me to relate to just a second. We have a green office, so if I'm not moving for too long, then the light switch on. Let me relate to them point by point. First of all, again, I remind you, and I will remind you again and again, Hamas' end game is to obliterate the state of Israel. So his attack is part of the attempt to terrorize the citizens of the state of Israel as part of his bigger picture, annihilate it in the future. If it has also a context in this point of time of hampering any negotiations, it's possible. But you understand from that it's another way of another reflections of this radical organization that opposes peace, that prevents peace or tries to prevent peace, because the Abraham Accords are a new paradigm in the Middle East. The Abraham Accords, where Israel established diplomatic relations with UAE, with Bahrain and Morocco, are a new paradigm of Israel's relations with the moderate Arab world. The moderate Arab world is the one that has the keys to change the landscape of the Middle East. Another thing that you mentioned is the situation in our borders. And I want to state one fact here. Iran is an octopus of terror. Iran finances Hamas, trains Hamas, equips Hamas. Iran controls Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is basically an Iranian trained and equipped and financed army that is controlling, has a grips in Lebanon. Iran has Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. And Iraq finance and equip the Houthi in Yemen. Let's have a word about the Houthi, because it takes me to the other point that you mentioned about economic impact. The Houthi in Yemen.
How about Qatar? What role do they play?
Let me first finish. Let me first finish with you. The Houthis rebels already had raids on 6 ships in the Red Sea, and by that violated completely the freedom of navigation and safety of salesmen. What impact it will have on global supply chains, because ships will not use the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, and by that the trade or the routes between China or in Asia and Europe will take longer and they will be more expensive. So you will see more impact on economy now. And I expect countries, including China, to put a pressure on it's not directly on the Houthis, it's on Iran, because Iran is the operative of the Houthis, to stop that. Because it will have an impact on the global economy. The fact that Iran does not directly launch attacks on Israel doesn't mean that it uses all its many proxies to do so. And again, I emphasize, Iran is an octopus of terror, which has arms everywhere in the Middle East. And the fact that our northern border, we don't have a full front war, doesn't mean that if we will be attacked from here, the situation will not be escalated to a full front war. We are not looking for that. We don't want that. But if this will be the situation, we will react accordingly.
Well, like I said, the markets is an integration of many people's knowledge and intelligence and so on. So, oil markets tell me that Iran, even them, never mind Saudi Arabia, are not very much interested in disrupting the supply of oil. And that's why oil fell below $70 last night. In my humble opinion.
If the attacks on ships in the Red Sea will continue, and may I remind you that the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, 12% of the global trade, and I think around 10% of the energy shipment goes from there, it will have an impact.
Yes, I understand. But I'm just, again, from a market's point of view, it knows more than I do, perhaps even more than you do. So if it thinks that there's a very high probability of, the Suez Canal getting blocked or, trade getting disrupted severely, or that OPEC plus will dramatically cut back supply of oil, like they did in the 1970s when they had wars with you, then oil should be above $100. The fact that it's instead of going up to 100 and 150, as some people predicted at the beginning of this current conflict, instead it's now down below 70. It's telling us something about I think, for overall the better relationship between Israel and most of the Arab states. This is my point.